The Topeka City Council meeting will come to order. Please rise as you are able for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Introduce Councilman Jensen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If you would all observe a moment of silence for the violence we've had in our community recently.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic, and one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. City Manager, we have a presentation this evening.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce and call to the podium Bill Nager from Bartlett and West Engineers. He is a member of the Sustainability Advisory Board for the City of Topeka, and he's going to give an overview of their actions over the last year. A copy of his report is at your desk tonight. Additionally, there is a memo from Mr. Peak, our Public Works Director, to myself that addresses some of the issues contained in the report. And finally, before Bill begins talking, I want to make sure we don't forget to introduce some other members of the advisory board that are here tonight to show their support. Deborah Swank, who is the chair of the board. Then we have Mary Powell. She could wave to the group. And then Heather Weed. So
could you please stand? We can't see back there sometimes, so we'll see you. Thank you for coming.
Okay,
right, thank you.
Okay.
Please.
Good evening. I want to thank Mayor Wolgass and the council for this opportunity this evening to report to you from the Sustainability Advisory Board. I hope that you all read the report provided to you and seriously consider the concepts addressed within. Instead of just providing a summary, I really want to address the concepts that are expressed within the report. We believe that the adoption of sustainable concepts is more valuable to our city than just the implementation of any one action in that report. The word sustainability can have a negative connotation to some, such that those who support the concept might even consider it to be extreme at times. Some might believe that to live in an attitude of sustainability is to do so at the expense of economic growth or require less energy use. But it's really an attitude of stewardship and using our energy and natural resources safely and efficiently. Stewardship that makes our community more desirable place to live and raise families and for businesses to thrive while minimizing cost. Companies in Topeka such as Westar Energy, Frito-Lay, and Mars are already functioning in this manner while maintaining and increasing profitability. This attitude of stewardship and sustainability corresponds with the attitude of rejuvenation of our downtown and the efforts to support community and economic growth while aligning with the values of our citizens. As leaders of our community, the council can lead in three specific areas. First, the selection of a new city manager. Second is a reinstatement of the sustainability coordinator position reporting to the manager. And third, encouragement of all city employees to be good stewards of the resources that are under their care. Leadership in these three areas and the adoption of the most recent building and energy conservation codes will benefit our city. It will improve our community's health and environment and build a better quality of life for the citizens for all generations. The Sustainability Advisory Board asks that the council seriously consider the recommendations included in the annual report and the ideas that drive them. These sustainable concepts can improve our government, our community, and our city's future. All generations want to leave our surroundings better for the next generations. So as citizens of Topeka, let's go do that.
Thank you.
I'm going to go one step back and to just introduce the Topeka Sustainability Advisory Board was created by the council. I'm going to say about 2007, 2008, and I know it was when Deborah Swank was a member of the council. And the council created it so that it would bring recommendations to the council on ways to improve sustainability in the city. Is that approximately correct?
Yes, that's my
And
understanding
then
of
for
our
council
goal.
members, so this,
Yes.
we have a report once a year like this with some recommendations to it, to the council. And I think then those were provided early to the city, and then the city manager had the Director of Public Works prepare a statement of in response, in a sense, of things that we are doing or that we can be doing.
Right.
Okay. Now, that's any questions, thoughts, discussion, any items? Councilman Hiller?
Well, Mayor, I'm not sure what the plan was for the presentation, but for the benefit of the public, I think it'd be helpful if Mr. Nager went through and at least identified what some of the recommendations were, and not necessarily going to a lot of depth if that wasn't the plan.
You gave three general ones, but if you want to speak to some of those and
Sure,
some of
I
the more
can do that.
specific aspects.
They're all included in the executive summary, but we'll touch on those. We recommended that the council consider sustainability when selecting a city manager because we think that that person needs to be in a leadership position in order to incorporate those concepts in what the city is doing and what we are doing as a community. So we would suggest that you consider quality of life initiatives that they're supporting, infrastructure conditions, and other sustainability initiatives. We also recommend to hire a full-time sustainability coordinator who would report directly to the city manager. Again, we believe that by having that close contact to the city manager, that it will have more impact on the actions that the city is taking. We also think that sometimes that position is necessary because sometimes we need somebody, that little voice in our ears reminding us of what to do to incorporate the sustainability concepts, and that it can be very simple things at times as well. So we think it's very important that that person is in place. We also recommend to adopt the energy efficiency elements of the international building codes. That's something that's been that I deal with on a daily basis. Most other communities, in fact, have the International Energy Conservation Code as part of their building codes. It doesn't add additional cost to projects. It simply gets them to be energy efficient and promotes that concept within the entire community and encourages that for individuals who are building projects in the city. We also thought it was important to do some things such as just some health and environment issues that the city's currently already working on. Complete the combined sewer infrastructure project. We know that's a large project, a lot of resources that has to go into that. It's going to take time, but we want to continue that. We think it's valuable to publish the water quality results on the website or something like that. Just help show that even the public that yes, the city is concerned with that and they're monitoring it, and it's not to tattletale on anybody, but it's to show the positive things that are occurring. Other things, support community gardens and shrink some of the food deserts in our city. Certainly with the development of downtown, as far as nearby grocery stores and stuff, that's not very plentiful in that area. So that's certainly one area of food deserts. We're promoting people and trying to get people to move downtown. They've got to be able to buy their groceries and things nearby too. And then broaden the quality of life focus, including reforestation. We know right now there's very minimal budget applied as far as replacing trees and things along the streets of our city. The value of the trees, both in aesthetics and as far as environment, is very valuable, and we think that should be included. Also, just completing the complete streets and bike pathway patterns, we think that that's valuable as well. And then enforcement of the land use and growth management plan to nurture inward growth to the city. All of those are very sustainable concepts and not something that's going to expect a lot of financial input, but can be small things that can have a large effect on it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Councilman Jensen?
Thank you, Your Honor. In the full report, do you make any recommendations on how to execute some of these? A good example would be, I'm interested in your methane recovery proposal for the water treatment plant. There's some value there if indeed it's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of energy.
Right.
But do you go into any kind of detail about how one might look at that and whether it's actually cost effective over time?
That's already been gone through some with an engineering firm and Sylvan, who oversees the water treatment plant. They've gone through that process to establish that. We don't think that it's really our part to describe the details as to how to make this happen. I guess we want to encourage the concepts of sustainability. And we think it's better off that we don't meddle in some other operations of the city and let them implement the concepts into their operations themselves.
Well, I asked that mainly because, like the grocery store, I do agree that taking care of food deserts is important, but that's not really the role of government in this case. The private sector builds grocery stores where they think they can best make a profit, and while we can do our best to encourage that, you don't want us in the grocery store business. So I'm interested why that was a recommendation by the Sustainability Board.
And I guess we're trying to recommend that encouragement that you're talking about, not that we're supporting the city going out and building a grocery store that says the city of Topeka across the front of it. Okay.
Fair enough.
And I know, Interim City Manager, do you want to comment on the first question pertaining to the,
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Councilman Jensen, that is, as Bill mentioned, that is an ongoing project. We have a partnership right now with Bartlett and West. They're our engineer on the project to capture that excess gas. We're trying to work with some local partners to actually sell that gas. But as you know, those kinds of projects take a while to implement, but it's funded and it's something we're working through.
Oh, that's excellent.
Almost literally as we speak.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And if I could comment on your second question, as far as the city's role with food deserts, in many cities, the good example is Kansas City, Kansas, where they have enabled developers, property owners, by giving certain incentives to go into a grocery store, to build one in an area where there isn't one for 3 or 4 miles. So there is a role for cities, not that we run grocery stores.
Agreed, and we already have incentives, I would assume now, through Go Topeka and that sort of thing for that. My issue is there are a lot of people have called me and said, you guys need to build a grocery store.
Okay.
And I don't know that anybody wants us to do that.
I don't think that's what they're
incentivizing. Absolutely.
That's not the role of the Sustainability Board. Okay.
And that's why I was just asking. Thank you.
Councilman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question's on that same line, kind of, sort of. We talked about the lights that go off after you leave the room, and I know that came up first, that first report year. Where are we at with that? Again, is that a financial issue, or do you know? Does anybody know?
I go with that to city manager.
Councilwoman, Mr. Mayor, I can speak generally.
Would you want to repeat? I think their mic wasn't on. You want to repeat the question?
Yeah, the question is, I think essentially, where are we at with some of the lighting replacement projects? Is that essentially?
Well, that's just one of the things, yes.
Okay. So if you look in the memorandum that Mr. Peak prepared for me, number 2 on the first page there, we did do some LED lighting conversion projects in a number of city facilities last year, including the fire fleet garage, transportation operations, yard lighting, fleet administration building, and then as part of the City Hall renovation project, that $8 million CIP project that's upcoming, that will be a crucial part of that project as well.
Well, and if I may, Mr. Mayor, we talked about all of the buildings for the city, not just City Hall, but we talked about all the buildings. So where are we at? And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you guys even provided us a list of offices that, with your recommendation. And I just never seen us go forth on any of that. And I don't know how much money they get or how much money is allotted for these projects, but I do know even the lighting, I do know it could save us thousands, but I just haven't seen or heard anything, and that's why I'm asking, where are we at on that?
Councilwoman, Mr. Mayor, there's no funding specifically allocated to this board or sustainability efforts generally. They just happen as parts of projects. The list you're referring to, I think that might have predated me and Mr. Peak as well. I'm certainly aware that there has been discussion about that, but in terms of where that might be, it's, you know, the projects we completed in the last year are the most recent examples of lighting projects that we've done.
Well, and if I may, I'd like to see us go back and these guys are doing a lot of hard work. And I appreciate the work that's being done and the committee that was put together to do this hard work to save us thousands, millions. So I'd like to see us go from the start and see where we're at, where we can, have staff look that up, just to see what can be done and for us to start implementing it, because I think you guys have been there long enough that we need to start really looking into that. And that would be my suggestion. But I just remember the lights, you know, and I think about when Sebelius became governor and how she turned out the docking lights and saved us millions of dollars. And that's always just stuck in my mind, so that's why I remember that. But if staff could do that, that would be great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sure. Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, Councilwoman Ortiz asked the questions. I would also like to just see where we are, because a lot of this seems like it's maybe pretty low-hanging fruit, you know, placing bulbs and stuff with LEDs. But I'd like that information too. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for your work.
Other questions for the Sustainability Board? Councilman?
Just a couple of clues for that. These are really great comments. I came on shortly after, you know, probably was about 2007, but just to fill in the blanks for the interim city manager and the public works director, there was a study done by Vermont Energy. So we spent money for Vermont Energy to put together an assessment of where we were and put together a set of goals that were not only big picture, but then very detailed for both what the city could do as well as what we could do as a community to advance sustainability. And then there was a wrap up in that study that I think Councilwoman Ortiz is thinking about, at least in part, that was a grid, and it was 10-year goals, and they were measurable goals in terms of what percentage or what reduction we could make at the city level and what we could encourage community-wide. Obviously, we can't control it, but we could be leaders in terms of demonstrating that we were taking steps internally in the city and encouraging the community by, you know, setting goals and also recommending some steps that could be taken in the community. And I think it probably would be good to dust that off. The real long detailed piece that you're remembering, as I recall, would be that at one point Johnson Controls had been engaged to bid for that, and that had pages and pages that listed every building and every light and all sorts of detail, and we decided back then that not to engage in that entire contract at the time, but to keep an eye on it and keep working on that through, and it sounds like that's happening to some extent, but between staff and the board, I think it would be a good idea. I do know, I don't want to talk bad on anybody, but when the staff changed along the way, there had been that driver to make sure that we were going paperless, and we were recycling the paper that was left over, and we were turning off lights, and we were not using space heaters. And as time passed, why, we started printing more stuff right and left, and people celebrated that the space heater police were not walking around anymore. And those are small things, but they all do add up. And so it had to do with that focus that we had as a city. So I really appreciate that you all have stayed together and have stayed focused, and appreciate the report, and maybe we can do a little better and mutually move towards some more goals. Thanks.
Thank you. If there are thank you again, and I compliment this committee. It is a hard-working committee. They work at this on a monthly basis, have speakers in, and see things that they can be doing. And I also compliment the fact that we have a response, which you can share with the committee and give us some more recommendations. It looks like you created some discussion tonight. I think that's your purpose. So thank you.
Thank you.
We will then proceed with the roll call.
Mayor Wolgast.
Here.
Councilmembers Hiller.
Here.
Clear. Here. Ortiz. Here. Emerson.
Here.
De La Isla. Jensen.
Present.
Schwartz. Here. Cohen.
Here.
And Harmon.
Councilwoman De La Isla is ill, will not be here this evening. Council members, we have one addition to the agenda. You have before you a noise resolution introduced by Councilmember Ortiz. And unless there is objection, we will add that to the consent agenda as item J. Seeing none, it is so added. We will then proceed with the appointments.
A is a board appointment recommending the appointment of Nicholas Exodus to the Downtown Business Improvement District Advisory Board to fill an unexpired term and a full term expiring July 1, 2020.
That is the appointment. Your pleasure. Councilman Hiller
Move to approve.
moves to approve. Councilman Jensen seconds. All those in favor vote yes. Opposed vote no. The mayor does not vote.
We have 8 yet?
Eight
yes.
Eight having voted yes, the appointment is approved. I would ask Nicholas Exodus to stand. Appreciate your service. And on the downtown, has a business down in downtown Topeka. You may have heard of it. It's called Hazel Hill Chocolates. And glad to have you on the Business Improvement Board. Thank you. Thank you for your service. We'll proceed with the consent agenda. I'm sorry.
If I may add, Nick and his wife Terry, as with many others, have moved downtown and live above their business as well. So they're both residents and business owners.
Thank you. The consent agenda.
A is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Sylvia Ortiz granting Litter Gonzalez an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at C concerning noise prohibitions. B is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Sylvia Ortiz granting Visit Topeka an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at C concerning noise prohibitions. C is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller granting the Rotary Club of Topeka an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at C concerning noise prohibitions. D is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller granting TTWT an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at C concerning noise prohibitions. E is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller granting Boys and Girls Club of Topeka an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 concerning noise prohibitions. F is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller approving a special event known as the 2017 Harley Party for the Boys and Girls Club of Topeka. G is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller approving a special event known as the Rotary Freedom Festival to be held July 1, 2017. H are minutes of the regular meeting of April 18, 2017. There's a list of applications for cereal malt beverage and open after midnight permits. Staff is recommending approval. And J is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Sylvia Ortiz granting Vanessa Rotana Merez and Delia Merez an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at C concerning noise prohibitions.
Okay, that is the consent agenda. Your pleasure. Councilman Jensen moves to approve. Councilwoman Schwartz seconds. Any of those in favor vote yes. Opposed vote no.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, consent agenda is approved. We go to the action items, A, an ordinance.
A is an ordinance introduced by interim city manager Doug Gerber concerning carrying of firearms in city-owned buildings, repealing City of Topeka Code Section 940-005.
Mr. Interim City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. This issue was discussed at the last governing body meeting. but I want to make sure there's a good understanding of what the issue is tonight, because as you recall at the last governing body meeting, in relationship to what I'll just broadly call the firearms issue, we discussed two separate pieces of it. One of those was at the time when our exemptions expire on certain of our buildings, City Hall, Holiday Building, Zoo, at the time when those exemptions expire, what level of security is appropriate and at what cost should we have that? That's sort of a separate issue which we're continuing to gather information on for this body. The issue before you tonight is whether or not you should appeal the ordinance that's before you because it conflicts with state law. The state law with which it conflicts was repealed or was changed by the state, I believe, in 2011, and so it's been out of compliance for a number of years. So credit to this really goes to Lisa Robertson and her staff in an ongoing effort to kind of clean up portions of our code that are out of compliance or don't make sense, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're recommending is that the council adopt this ordinance, which would repeal the section of the code which addresses firearms in city buildings for two reasons. One, it's out of compliance with state law. Specifically, the city really doesn't have any jurisdiction over that anymore. The state has inserted itself into that role, and we simply don't have a say. We're recommending that you approve the ordinance, which...
Are there questions or discussion? Councilman Clear?
So does this mean anyone can walk into the building carrying a firearm now, and even if we repeal this, they still can anyway? I mean, even if we don't repeal this, they can anyway?
Mr. Mayor and Councilwoman, a couple of things. If you look on the ordinance in your packet, if you look at page 1, for example, page 2, the places that are crossed out, the city doesn't even have ownership of many of those buildings anymore. And so that alone is a reason to move forward with this. What this does is brings us into compliance with state law, which says that we can ban concealed carry right now in buildings in which we have an exemption. And those buildings are, as noted previously, City Hall, the Holiday Building, the LEC,
The zoo.
and I'm missing one, the zoo. Thank you.
Okay, so they're exempt from that state law,
So yes, they're exempt, but our exemption expires at the end of this year.
and that's what the other is
And
about.
so that's the other piece of it. That'll be the ongoing discussion as to if we want to let the exemption expire. If so, then we do nothing. If we don't, then we have to put adequate security in place, which, as we talked about at the last meeting, adequate security has two components to it. The first is armed personnel, and the second is a metal detector of some sort.
So I noticed Topeka fire stations are on here, so now they would not be on the exempt list.
Councilwoman, that's correct, but they're not now.
Okay. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. It's confusing.
It is confusing.
Councilman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's very confusing. So you're asking us to repeal it, and what does that basically do? Because we haven't even decided what we're going to do financially. So I'm kind of confused on how we can repeal something and we don't know what we're going to do. I thought we were okay as long as we posted no firearms. And now you're saying we don't meet state statute, so I'm really confused.
Councilmember Ortiz, basically, the ordinance that's on the books today, which is 9.40.005, conflicts with state law, period. So it contains language that's different from what's in the state law. So state law is going to trump whatever we have in here. It's also outdated because there are 32 buildings listed, and almost half, if not more of those, we don't even own anymore. So, as stated previously, the whole issue with how much money we want to budget for security, whether or not we want to continue exemptions for the buildings on which they exist now, has to be determined separately from this, because this ordinance, as it's written right now on the books, conflicts with state law, and it's not effectual. We can't enforce it.
So it's almost like two different things.
It's
Well,
absolutely
it is two different things, I
Yeah.
agree.
And I think
Absolutely.
this is
Mr. Mayor, and that's,
repealing, yeah.
you know, that's what we're trying to say, is that the discussion of whether to put security in place and what that might cost and all of those things, that will be another completely separate discussion with this body before any of those decisions are made.
But the decision that we make tonight, whether we repeal it or not, will affect the decision that we'll have to make on the financial. Is that correct?
That is not correct, Councilwoman.
Oh, why isn't that correct?
The decision you make tonight maintains the status quo
Okay.
and brings us, we have an ordinance that conflicts with state law, and we need to get it off the books.
Okay. Well, it's very confusing when we pass ordinances to comply with state law, and then they come back and say, well, that didn't apply with state law. So that's really kind of confusing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Other questions? Councilman Jensen.
Thank you, Your Honor. So this is really just a cleanup action. This thing is obsolete, unenforceable, and is not really doing anything now, so there's no reason for us to keep it on our books, is essentially what you're saying, correct?
That's correct, Councilmember Jensen. During the whole review of the process, we've determined that this was in the books and needed to be taken out because it's of no further force and effect.
When would the effective date of this change be?
The repeal would be immediate unless you have a waiting period of this particular?
Correct, yes.
9.4?
Yeah.
I think it's immediate.
Okay.
Isn't it, Brenda?
Upon
Yeah,
publication.
publication.
Okay, all right.
That's 60 days?
I've just wondered, but since it's not affecting or doing anything now,
It won't.
yeah, it doesn't really
It's
even
not gonna
matter. This is
affect
just a
any
cleanup
huge
action to
change.
make sure our code is nice and pretty.
Correct.
And so you're going to move, would you like
Yes,
to
so
move?
with that, I will move to approve.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. Deputy Mayor Cohen seconds motion. We have before us a motion second to approve the ordinance, which is repealing this particular section of our code. All those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, the ordinance is approved. That completes our action items for this evening. We'll go to the non-action items. First is discussion, if the clerk would read.
A is discussion regarding the request to name the 10th Street and Branner Bridge the Nick Chiles Memorial Bridge.
Mr. Interim City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I believe staff's going to pull up a map just for a visual reference. Several years ago, the council adopted a policy under which city facilities, buildings, bridges, streets could be named for significant individuals. And a couple of months ago, we had a gentleman approach the city manager's office, working with planning staff and public works staff, with a request to name the 10th Street Bridge the Nick Chiles Memorial Bridge. And at that time, we had a nice discussion with Del Wilburn, who's in the audience tonight. He's a little bit shy, but he's in the audience. And I know he'd love to come up and speak at some point if you have some questions for him. We had a good discussion with him about renaming this bridge about Nick Chiles. So we went through the process. He submitted his application, submitted some letters of recommendation, have gotten some additional letters of recommendation. If you haven't had a chance to read through some of these letters, it's a really fascinating story. Truthfully, I'm not much of a history person. I use it for bedtime reading to help me go to sleep, but there's some really good information in here about this individual and the impact he made on Topeka. And I know there's some other folks in the audience who could do more justice to this issue, and in fact, will do more justice to this issue, but just a couple of highlights as to why this individual is notable in Topeka history. This individual, Mr. Chiles, started the first hotel for African Americans in Topeka. He was a restaurateur, had a 60-acre farm and a skating rink. Most notably, He's most famous for being the manager and editor of The Plain Dealer, which was an African-American newspaper, which in this day and age of instant gratification and 140-word tweets, 140-character tweets, the idea of a weekly paper providing the source of news for folks, to me, is a fascinating historical insight on Topeka and how that impacted segments of our community. So with all those things, I think this is an appropriate decision for the body to move forward with. And with that, I'd introduce a couple of other people who are in the audience who I believe also may want to make some comments. One is Donna Ray Pearson is here, and she helped Mr. Wilburn with his research and can provide some more interesting insights, I think. And then Patrick Woods was one of the folks who submitted a letter on behalf. So.
And Patrick Woods has signed, requested to speak, so Mr. Woods, if you would come forward to the podium and address the council, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Manager and members of the governing body. My name is Patrick Woods. I live at 909 Southwest Mifflin Road. I don't know if you guys require that.
No, we don't, but that's good to know.
So, okay. No, thank you for the opportunity to address you on this very important topic. I'm here to declare my strong support for the proposal to rename the bridge that you just heard about, the Branner Street Bridge over 10th, as the Nick Chiles Bridge. You have no doubt read the letter that I submitted, so I'm not going to read it to you point by point. But I will say that I think this is an opportunity that you all have to actually complete history in a way, to right a wrong of omission, in a sense, in which you complete history and you tell a more complete story of Topeka, and you get a chance to inspire, hopefully, some young people to do some really awesome things. So, Mr. Chiles, as you heard, and this will probably be stated, and you've no doubt read in all the information that was submitted to you, but his days in the Capitol were distinguished not only by the multiple successful businesses that you just heard the manager mention, but in my mind, the true measure of Mr. Chiles' distinguished citizenship becomes clear once we consider his activism for civil rights of Black Americans. So I don't have time to fully and adequately discuss all of the different changes that were achieved due to his service, and you've certainly read them. But I will say that I think history has proven Mr. Chiles' unyielding and self-sacrificing activism to have been effective in achieving change that's both meaningful and enduring, which is kind of what we are all looking for, all of us public servants. The real reason that I think that I'm most passionate about this issue, when I heard about it, I read it in the newspaper, is because I think you have an opportunity to hopefully inspire some young people. So in my nightlife, I moonlight as a school board member for Topeka Public Schools, and well, that's about what you call it, because the paycheck's so rich. I'm not here representing the school board, but I am here just as a Topekan. But I think it's really important that we embrace efforts like this, in which we get to correct historical omissions and complete our history and make it more relevant to all Topekans, who are just, especially the young ones, they're just coming of age where they're trying to figure out who they are, and to have a more full picture of the history of Topeka as a place where they can grow, stay, become productive citizens, hopefully, and help things like our awesome downtown revitalization that you guys are doing. So I think placing the name of Nick Chiles in public view will equip children with a more complete historical lens through which they can view the shared past. They can interpret the events of the present, and hopefully maybe even divine the future. You could inspire the next Nick Chiles, I hope. So for these reasons, I urge you, when you have the opportunity, when the measure is before you, to actually take action on it, to give full consideration to this and approve it and advance it on to the next spot. And actually, when you do, if you have a ribbon cutting or something on the bridge, then we'll make sure and have folks who will be there to support you in doing it. Thank you for your time and for your service to our city.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Certainly, Mr. Wilburn, if you'd like to speak, or we certainly appreciate your work, the background work that you have done.
No.
Okay. While he's coming up, excuse me, Mr. Interim City Manager had a question.
Yeah. Mr. Gerber, I just had a question. When we do a Memorial Parkway designation, the petitioner pays for the signs, and I see here it's saying that this would actually come out of the city budget. Is there a reason for the difference? And I understand there might be a benefactor anyway willing to donate that money, but I guess I just had that as a question.
Excuse me, Councilman Emerson, Mr. Mayor. I don't know that there's a difference necessarily. It's just the direction we're proceeding with this particular request. It's several $100s, and so it wasn't going to impact our budget in a material way. So that's the direction we're proceeding.
Mr. Wilburn.
Well, thank you for allowing me to have the opportunity to speak with you. I felt a bridge would be important because if you asked me 3 years ago who Nick Chiles was, I would have said who. And by taking an impromptu poll on the street, asking other Topekans who Nick Chiles is, they don't know who he is. This man was very important. For some reason, he just fell through a crack of history. There were two important newspaper editors in Kansas at the turn of that century, William Allen White, who we all know about, and Nick Chiles, who no one knows about, or very few know about. Nick Chiles spoke out against the issues that were important to my grandfather. I didn't get to know my grandfather. I was 10 when he died, and I never knew what life was like for him growing up in this area. I have some idea of that now by reading The Plain Dealer and seeing the issues that were important then, and I'm sure had crossed his mind too. I think Nick Chiles deserves a recommendation, and I felt a bridge would be a good way to do it. And when people see his name, they'll ask questions who this fellow is, and they will go to our fine library here and read the papers that are available on microfilm. And I think if the Royals keep losing and it's between KU basketball and K-State football, you'll have the opportunity to read the newspapers also.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Councilwoman Ortiz. Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Wilburn, we have a question for you. Councilwoman Claire.
You kind of answered it because I was wondering what the connection was to the bridge to Mr. Chiles, but you kind of answered that.
There's really no connection. His family lived on 12th Street, 600 block of 12th Street, and they had a grocery store at 1209 Washington, which is not too far from the area. Mm-hmm. But there was really no connection with that bridge at all.
Okay. Thank you.
And another interesting point is the 6th Street Bridge over from Monroe to Branner is the Oscar Stauffer Bridge. So now 4 blocks up, we're going to have another newspaperman honored, if it should pass, by the naming of a bridge. So I think there's a certain very ironic correlation there between those two. Other questions, Councilwoman Ortiz?
I have a couple comments. I would just
for Mr. Wilburn, and we can let him.
No,
okay,
no.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I represent District 3, and I know Mr. Wilburn has tried to get a hold of myself when me and him have spoken. Also the NIA president, who has been working long hours at Mars. And we haven't been able to have a NIA meeting I'm not going to say that the NIA doesn't support this. We just haven't been able to meet and officially vote on it. And so I see that he's went out and got some other backings, and that's okay. I just wanted to clarify that it's only appropriate to meet and have a vote, and instead of having the president just write that letter of recommendation. I always think it's neat when history is being said, and however way we say it or do it. And I think it's appropriate with the new bridge that we put a new title on it. So I will be supporting this. And I'm also concerned, as Mr. Henderson had stated, with the funding. It's so very important that we stay consistent. It doesn't matter if it bothers our budget or not, City Manager. We had 2 dedications, and both of those entities came up with their money. And when we start singling out, and not taking anything away from the Nick Childs Bridge, but when we start singling out, we can do for this, then other people are going to expect it. And I would hate to tell Mr. Templeton or Letha Cushenberry, 2 very, very, very strong people in our neighborhoods, that we're going to support one and not the other. So if that's not in that recommendation, that and I believe it is, I think we really need to fix that policy, because I just don't like it when we start picking and choosing and saying, well, we're going to pay for this or we're going to pay for that, because we've got other things, and I just like to see us stay consistent. So if we can stay consistent, I'd like to, especially if there's a donor that's going to do it. I think that's awesome. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Councilwoman Schwartz.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ortiz, because that's exactly my sentiments. And I would like to see us somehow, with the Historical Society or on our website, you know, I'm working on Emma Carlin's Garden and writing her story so that it is out there. I really think that we need somewhere, whether it's on our website or whether it's the Historical Society, that if we have a bridge or a street named after somebody, there needs to be something to it. I know this is the George and East Gray building, but most people don't even know who George and East Gray was. You know, I just think that we need to extend our historical our heritage in Topeka, and we need a way to do that. I know I worked side by side with a Wyandotte County legislator, and he got a bridge named in Wyandotte County, and I'll bet half the people don't even know who he was because it's just a bridge named. And I mean, you think about every venue or whatever has a name after it. It'd be nice if we know why it was named for that. So I do agree, though, that we shouldn't pick and choose which ones the city's going to fund and which ones they're going to raise the money to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Other comments? Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, maybe I can provide a little institutional history on funding bridges and funding signs that goes beyond just the last year or 2. First, though, I really appreciate this nomination. I do think it's a strong one because this is a gentleman who affected our history overall as a city. He was a full-blown community leader and contributed to in being a leader in, let's say, a century worth of top Topekans. In the past, we have the city then has named bridges before, and if we were going to be traditional, I don't think anybody's ever been charged to do the signs on the bridges. And I think, the best I know, without a lot of discussion, it's because when those choices have been made, they were people that were leaders from the community at large and contributed to our full community history, maybe let's just say worth a century or our whole history. The latest designations that we've had where people wanted to name a street or memorialize on a street next to a particular location that was meaningful, a person that had been meaningful to that church congregation or to a lot of people certainly, but not of that centennial stature. I'm comfortable with how the staff handled that in terms of suggesting that it would just be a block, there'd be a nomination from that block, and that there would be fundraising for it. And at the same time then leaving our tradition of doing bridges, being pretty selective about who that might be, and supporting them. I particularly like, of course, there wasn't an interstate or a bridge at all when Mr. Chiles lived in more the downtown or what's now the Monroe area and had his store in East Topeka. But I think that particular bridge is very, very well located in terms of reflecting and recognizing him. So I'm comfortable with the whole thing.
Is there other discussion? Seeing none, completes the discussion on this item. And this will be on the agenda then at some point next week. All right. So it'll be the final action then would be taken next week on this item. We go to item B, discussion.
B is discussion on the status of the proposed miniature pig ordinance and animal code review.
Okay, this issue was referred by the council to the Public Health and Safety Committee. So we call on the committee chair, Mr. Jensen, for his report from the committee.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So we've made some great progress in the committee discussing both what we're going to do with the mini pig ordinance and then our larger review of animal control. At this point, we've split it into two phases. The first thing we're going to try and tackle is how to appropriately add mini pigs to bring before the council's consideration. The next meeting we are planning to have shortly, we're going to bring in some veterinarians and try to get a better feel for what the healthcare requirements of these animals actually are. We've also discussed at length, the number, how much they can weigh, that sort of thing. For the most part, we've just retained what the discussion was we had at the council level. And then we've also asked some city staff to go through and try to identify deficiencies in the existing animal control code where we might need to make some improvements. There's been a lot of work done in the last few years with that, and we're trying to build on those successes, identify where we might still need a little bit of work, and improve that, and then bring it back to the council for consideration. That I'll take any questions or comments.
All right. So actually, this is the report back. It's a work in progress.
Correct. We're not quite done, but we're making great progress, and we hope to have something for you all soon.
Okay. Are there questions? Any comments, Councilman Ortiz?
Mr. Mayor, I know it has to come back to the council, but do we need to vote this back to the Public Health and Safety? I thought we need to send it back since we don't have a...
I
don't think. I think it stays. It remains there.
Right, until it comes out of committee and the committee recommendation is.
Well, I thought the way that it used to be, that it had to come back and then we had to reprimand it back.
Okay.
If it's after 90 days, I think.
Is it?
Historian.
Man, Richard,
I believe it's after.
Hey, Richard, we need somewhere to put history.
Those of you that...
Elaine said we need somewhere to put history.
Those of you that predate.
Well, it used to be. I remember we changed our council rules. And you're recalling correctly, but we've since changed our council rules.
I'm happy to make that motion.
Okay, move to refer it back
Let's
to
just
the...
do that to clean it up.
Move to refer it back to the...
Yes, to both items, mini pigs and a review of animal control.
And Deputy Mayor Cohen seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no. This is a discussion item, but we can take action if we choose to do so. Is that correct? It wasn't listed on the, because we're referring an item.
Correct. I believe, Mayor, this is just a report from the committee, and I don't think there's anything that they've asked for action on. I think they just need comments, if there are any comments, as far as what the committee needs to continue its work on, if there's something that anybody wants to add.
But we can do a vote on this
The discussion.
as a discussion item
Yes.
of referring it back.
Yes.
Okay, we can
I'm
do
sorry,
this.
I didn't.
Okay.
All those
get your
in favor
question
vote
out.
yes,
Yeah.
opposed vote no, of referring it back to the committee.
All else fails, we're just building consensus.
I know,
We'll check before next time.
That's right.
if it's close.
We have 9 yes.
If it's close.
9 having voted yes, it is referred back to the committee.
Before we move on,
I'm sorry,
are there
sure.
any comments or questions I could answer about that? Has anyone got any feedback from their constituents that we would need to incorporate in that?
Councilwoman Schwartz?
Oh, well, yes, since I'm not on the committee. I'll probably be voting no against this. I really believe that we need to study this further, and we have a lot of dogs and cats that need adoption out there. So, and I'm hearing that from my constituents.
No, you're speaking to the miniature pig issue, and that's because we have two issues. Okay. Deputy Mayor Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. I've been hearing also a lot of negative responses. They say, you know, the livestock needs to be out in the country, and that's why they move out there. I also want to mention that I'm in a business building group, which is 16 of us small business owners. When we get together, I just asked them, so what do you guys think about having pigs in the city? And everybody just said no. I mean, just yelled it right back at me. So I think our sentiment is the livestock does need to be out there in the country. I mean, we have chickens in the city, and we have a rooster that lives a couple doors down. It does get kind of annoying, but I don't have to smell the rooster. So, thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Councilman Emerson.
Not to pile on here, but I've basically heard the same, and I also have a rooster problem in my district, so with you there.
Councilman Claire.
I want to make sure, though, that we're not talking a bunch of hogs and a miniature pig. I mean, a miniature pig is a pet in the home. It doesn't have a pen out in the yard. It's not a big hog that wallows in the mud. They're two different things. So I just want to make sure that people understand that they're two different things.
Okay, good point. Good point. Councilman Ortiz.
I would just like to invite everybody to our meetings, and I'd like to hear your feedback, or you can send it to Mr. Jensen and he could forward to us. Because we've had 2 meetings and we've only had a few people show up, and I too have heard a lot of conversation, but I would welcome all your input.
So additionally, most of the livestock you all refer to is actually completely legal now. And so that's another thing is, do we need to address that? Goats are legal, horses are legal, cows are legal. So we need to have a broader conversation than to determine what that is. You know, right now, and as far as I know, there aren't miniature cows. So, you know, while you might not be able to smell a pig, you could definitely smell a cow. And currently that's permitted.
Yeah. Okay.
Other comments?
These are some of the issues we have, Deputy Mayor.
I agree. I wouldn't want a horse or cows next to me either, but when you refer to the term miniature pig, I mean, how large is a miniature pig?
They would not be able to exceed 150 pounds and couldn't be more than 20 inches tall. By comparison, a 150-pound pig weighs the same as a 75-pound, or is about the same size as a 75-pound dog.
Yeah, it's a 150-pound pig.
It's actually quite small, believe it or not. Yeah, a regular pig is about 1,200 pounds.
Okay.
So, well, just as an example.
To what comes out of the committee.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Councilman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a chance to look over some of the draft comments and so on that you were looking at in the committee. I think something to consider is there, as you, assuming you're going to proceed and do more due diligence on this, there were a number of comments that came in from staff, I think, raising issues about things that would cost more money. Different cages, different cleaning, different fees to, if one got loose, to capture, different tools for capture, more training. Certainly some of the conversation that has come back has been people feeling like we needed to watch our pennies and focus on doing what we already had on our table well. It may be that you all talk through some of those costs, but if there are some extensive costs, I think that probably wouldn't go over very well.
Well, and that's why we involved all the folks from Animal Control.
Sure.
As you know, we already have processes in place now to handle that because there already are a significant number of pigs in the community. And so, for the most part, we're relying on the staff to continue exercising the processes they already have in place. I wouldn't expect there to be a significantly large increase in pigs once this has changed. It's merely an attempt to legalize what we already have and then address some of the deficiencies in the code in the second phase. So I do agree with you in that I wouldn't want to create a significantly larger cost to take care of that on the city side, but at this point, the process is in place. It's working now. There doesn't seem to be a significant number of issues with these animals, at least in the recent past. So I don't believe there would be any cost increases as part of this. That said, that is something that we are considering, and that's why we involve the animal control folks in our discussions right away, because that is the critical aspect of it.
And now remember, we just voted to refer this to the committee. We can certainly discuss it.
We appreciate these comments, though, because these are the things that we need to make sure we've reviewed in the committee, so when we bring it back to council, we have answers to your questions. So that information is invaluable for us to have to take back and work on.
Councilman Clare.
One comment, I spoke to 5 different humane shelters around Topeka. None of them have ever had a runaway pig. So I'm be surprised if we have a runaway pig.
Thank you. Councilwoman Schwartz.
But in response to that, I would hope we have the Helping Hands Humane Society at the committee meeting saying if they can handle that, because I've heard they can't.
If I could, we've invited them. However, we have a contract in place that doesn't involve them. So if there is a pig issue now or in the future, they would not be involved. We have a contract with a vet outside the city limits that we take the animals to now. So Helping Hands has essentially nothing to worry about, and at this point, nothing to do with the process. So.
Okay. One more.
Just to reply across the table.
To conclude this discussion.
What we learned at an earlier meeting when we talked about this, that the shelters aren't legally allowed to take livestock. So.
Yeah.
Maybe here, others are.
Well,
Okay, folks, I really think that this is why we refer it to the committee.
that's what they told us when we.
I want to thank everyone for their comments and feedback. That's invaluable. And to those folks in the public, if you have comments or questions, please let me know. That's why we discuss this in public, is we need that feedback, and we want to make good decisions for everyone involved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Completes the discussion and the non-action items. We go to the announcements. First, we have the preliminary agenda for next week.
On the May 9th agenda, we have 2 presentations, the first quarter city financial report and the first quarter public works utilities report. On the consent agenda, we'll have 2 special events resolution and 2 noise resolutions. For action items, we'll have a public hearing and ordinance to establish the Topeka Tourism Bid Improvement District. We'll have 2 ordinances relating to research, one's for annexation, the other one's to change the zoning. And then we will have the resolution renaming the 10th Street Bridge. For discussions, we will have this Southeast 8th Avenue Railroad crossing closing. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. City Manager for announcements.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. A couple of meeting reminders for folks. Tomorrow night, we have the final Futures 2040 meeting. That is at the library beginning at 5:30. And the plan recommendations are online for folks at topekampo.org. And again, it's just the final time to come and make those comments for people. We have a number of fallen law enforcement officers memorial events over the next couple of days in Topeka and statewide. Specifically, there's something at 9 o'clock Thursday at the LAC, and then there's one at the state capitol at noon on Friday that are more specific to Topeka. Also on Thursday, we have kind of a feather in our cap for the zoo. We have some USDA, Department of Agriculture folks coming to the zoo to do some training inspections. So they've chosen our zoo as a model place to come where they can train their folks as to how things should look, I think.
Instead of find 30 violations.
Instead of looking for violations, they're going to show their new inspectors what it should look like. So that's Feather and Brendan and his staff's cap. Want to introduce Nick Hawkins. Have Nick stand up. Nick is our new budget manager. He replaces Nikki Lee. Nick's been with us a week and a day now, 2 days. He comes to us from the city of Kansas City, Missouri. So he has good experience with a city similar to us and a budget similar to us, and is already making some good contributions, and we're glad to have him here in our busy budget time.
Thank you. Welcome.
Welcome, Nick.
Welcome.
A couple more announcements. I'd be remiss if I didn't make note that tonight is the last meeting at which you'll be seeing Allie Van Dyke. As was announced, Allie is moving on to the city of Austin, and I think it's fair to say we will all miss her unique style and the contributions that she's brought to the city. She's done a really good job. I remember commenting early on that it was nice not to be getting our teeth kicked in by the media anymore after Allie's arrival, and so that's always been a comment that's kind of stuck with me. So we will definitely miss Allie in her departure.
Wish her well.
But we do have a nice replacement sitting right next to her in the short term at least. And I think most of you know Amy McCarter. She comes to us internally from the Topeka Police Department, where she's been a media relations specialist, and she's going to step in and continue some good things for us.
Thank you. Welcome.
And then the last thing I have is I just want to, similar to what Councilman Jensen said in his moment of silence, we have been rocked by a number of shootings in the community over this last week. And certainly our thoughts and prayers go out to the families impacted by that. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the officers that have impacted by being there. A lot of those officers, it's their first time at a scene like that, and so they've been specifically impacted. These are certainly random acts of senselessness, but want to make sure everybody knows that our police department is doing everything they can to address some of the underlying issues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council, I have one major item, and that is just to remind you that in the plan for our process of finding a city manager, the schedule was the fourth Tuesday of this month. We will have a meeting. It will be a special council meeting. It will be called for that purpose, and that purpose only, at which time the company will provide a list of candidates, and the council will narrow that down to the finalists. I had a report yesterday. They have 10 candidates. There's 2 more weeks that it is open, so expect to have a number of more coming in, and they feel confident about the level of people who are applying. So, but just make sure you have that on your calendar. So we'll be meeting a fourth Tuesday of the month at 6 o'clock. And I also want to follow up the other just very quickly, because I've had questions pertaining to the number of actually killings within the last few days. And as the city manager said, it's very important to note these were all intra-grouped murders. There was nothing where there was anything outside, almost within a residence or on a property, of people knowing one another. Unfortunately, we have now the tag of having 5 murders, but yet it's nothing. If there had been a police officer in a car in that block, it wouldn't have prevented anything, because it's happening. So it's one of those very tragic situations for any city that cities have. But we certainly want to be aware of that. And as far as our citizens, we have 5 murders, but it did not affect the quality of our safety in this community, because it was within a certain situation, which in a sense is unfortunate. Councilman Jensen.
Thank you, Your Honor. Really, the only thing I have is to remind everyone that on Star Wars Day, May the 4th, I'm having a town hall for District 6. I want to give a special shout out to the library. They have really been over backwards to help me put this on and to stream it for folks that aren't able to travel. BrendanJensen.com/town hall is where you should be able to view it live, as long as all the technology works. Big thanks to the library for helping me do all that, though, and I would love to see you all there if you can.
Okay. Councilman Schwartz.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm wearing purple tonight because my granddaughter got up. She's going to be a sophomore as a K-State cheerleader.
Oh,
so
very
I'm really
good.
excited
Wonderful.
about that. And I wanted to thank the community support for the Roar and Pour last Saturday at the zoo. We could not believe the attendance. The rain was coming down. And also, with this past week, we had the Blintz Brunch and the Holocaust Memorial, and we had a really good turnout for those. And I do want to thank, too, the police officers that responded to this. As a former state employee with adult mental health services, I had a couple of calls today about whether or not residential streets that have assisted living or long-term care or resident group homes, if they're zoned correctly. A couple of the calls are coming from people that live in an area where there is a assisted living or a group home. And I think we need maybe some some more information on the zoning issues and just to get a report so that the citizens know exactly what they should be reporting if there's issues. So, thank you.
Very good. Oh, thank you. Deputy Mayor Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. Ditto, City Manager. Ditto, Mayor. The loss of life is tragic, and our prayers just go out to those families. It's just,
thank you.
It's awful. Thank you.
Councilman Harmon, Councilwoman Hiller.
I too want to weigh in on the tragedies that we had, and particularly to share, I did directly with Chief Kramer, but the thanks to the officers, all of them, the ones that were serving and the ones that have supported and covered, and that's hard for the neighbors, the citizens, and the families, and so, well, these are good suggestions and comments that come out of the council. I wanted to point out, too, that I'm wearing a new pin today, and that is a memento of Rita Wolf, who was one of the most outstanding Topekans, most outstanding people I've ever known, and her memorial was it yesterday? Yesterday evening, and it was rich and warm, but her contributions in terms of role modeling for all of us, what it's like just to be a wonderful person, to be loving and caring. She represented professionalism, role modeled for race relations. She was a Jamaican, African-American Jamaican woman who was a department head at the state departments, a businesswoman, a scientist, raised wonderful daughters, just a special person that I don't know what it would be exactly, but to memorialize her in the future in this community, I think would be of great value for all of us. On a little lighter note, this weekend is way too full for anybody to do everything, and I will mention some events that haven't been mentioned already. Friday is, of course, First Friday, which will rock all over town, but it is also the Cultivate event. It will be at the site of the new plaza at 7th and Kansas, and we'll have rapping, singing, and dancing, and more. Saturday is Kids Fest out at Westridge Mall. Downtown is Cruise Night from 3 to 8, and then there will also be music, hip-hop music on 8th Street, Lecrae and Trip Lee from 7 to 10. And I think I'm going to try on a little slower note to catch one of the last performances of To Kill a Mockingbird at Topeka Civic Theater, and that has been highly acclaimed as well. So it's a great time to be in Topeka, even with some of the tough times.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Clear.
I have something exciting this weekend also, garage sales. Oakland garage sales. Get your deals. Also, Topeka Metro's seniors ride free, 65 years old plus. And I'll mention next week, but I want to remind everyone that the sidewalk chalk art in No-Toe is Saturday the 13th. I'll say more about that next week.
All right. Thank you. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to weigh in on the murder victims. They were born and raised Topekans, and Topeka is really hurting by these families with this terrible tragedy, and it really hurts when you have people that have, you know, everybody helps in their own way, and they volunteer and they give in their own way, and this is a huge family that has been affected. So our thoughts and prayers will continue to go out to them. I too received some calls on what is the police doing, blah 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 blah. So I appreciate you weighing in on that, Mr. Mayor, because mental illness is really serious, and when they took away our state hospital and they started shutting down places, we have nowhere for them to go, and that's what's really sad. I specifically want to thank our safety personnel, and I say safety because not only were our officers there, but our firefighters were there, and our ambulance, and it just spirals with everybody. So I appreciate the jobs that they continue to do. And last but not least, you know, it went very viral, the officer that helped the 4-year-old autistic kid. And I'm trying to think of his name here, Chief. Officer Bulmer, yeah. And so that was just awesome, because so many times it's just little things like that they do, that they continuously do, that they don't get recognized for. So that was just awesome. And I remember one time talking to Chief Wallace, and he said, we find more kids wandering around, after dark than we know what to do with. And so anyway, that on a good note, we're happy for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank everyone that came out to, last week we had Arts at the Park. Again, this is the 100-year anniversary of Highland Park High School. It was a great time, very talented people there. It was a fantastic thing. And kind of like Ms. Hiller said, this weekend there's a lot of things. One event that I don't think got mentioned yet is this Saturday is called ShareFest, and it is a program, I believe this is in about the 10th year, and this year it's up to 1,800 people from about 15 organizations, both a lot of churches as well as some civic organizations are banding together, going out to almost all the 501 schools, going to the Boys Club, and the Topeka Rescue Mission. Oddly enough, I've never been invited back to this thing twice, to the same site, so I don't know what that says about my work, but I will be at Randolph School helping out, and I feel sorry for Randolph, but it's a fantastic event, and you can go, if you are not signed up, you don't have to be a member of one of these organizations. If you want to help out and be a part of this great event, you can go to sharefesttopeka.com. That's sharefesttopeka.com, and I think it's at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning, but go there and you sign up, you can get a free shirt. Thank you.
Thank you. That completes the announcements. We go to public comment. Camille Noe, the League of Women Voters.
Good evening. I'm Camille, and I'm with the League of Women Voters, Topeka, Shawnee County. And our organization, along with the Topeka Chamber and Community Resources Council, is sponsoring a candidate school for anyone who's considering running for city council or for the mayor's position. It could be if a person just is, they don't know if they want to run or not. Anyway, this will be May 9th, 6 to 8 p.m. at the library. We will have Carol Williams from Government Ethics is there, Mark Stock from the Election Commission office, a former treasurer who can explain, along with Carol Williams, what documents have to be filed, and some former city council members, just to kind of talk about what that experience is like. There's no need to register ahead of time, and I've got some flyers I will leave at the back. So I'm not addressing this just to people here, but anyone watching on television also who may want to run for city council or mayor. Anyone who's even considering it is surely invited. And hopefully this will make candidates a little more informed about the processes involved.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And I think you're speaking to some who've participated in those.
Good.
Some of us have been there. Thank you.
Good.
That completes public comment. There is no executive session. There's no more business before the council. We are adjourned.
They're not even getting our money.
They've used, they don't use sitting council people, but they've used